I'll just take only 10 minutes to explain what we are doing and why we are talking about poverty in the context of overall policy. The three words that are extremely important in the way Treasury and the wider public sector are now thinking about proper policy. The purpose is no longer economic growth, it's well-being. How does poverty fit into that thinking? And how does then public policy help well-being through poverty reduction and other mechanisms? To say the purpose of public policy is to help people live the kinds of lives they have reason to value. In other words, it is none of our business as bureaucrats to tell people how to live their lives, but we want to make sure that they live the kinds of lives they want to live without any judgment. So how do you close this circle? On the one hand, you want to help people live their lives. On the other hand, you don't want to interfere with how they want to live their lives. So what could be the purpose of public policy? A lot of people have agonized about this, and where we are right now, and happy to be insulted about this, but just that's where we are right now, is what we're saying is what we could do is to expand the opportunities and capabilities of people so that they can then choose how they want to live their lives. So that's the way where we are right now. What we know from a lot of work around the world, and the OECD being the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, agonizing about that, the World Bank and numerous other institutions have now found without any doubt that people care about much more than their material well-being, although that's critical. They also care about housing, health status, their relationships, their work-life balance, education, social connections, civic engagement, environmental quality, personal security, and overall subjective well-being. We know that, so that's no longer debated. Anyone who debates that needs to be locked up. So the question is, what do you do with it? And that's the next slide, please. So this is the picture. We've created a larger version of this, hangs on my bedroom wall, and my wife and I look at it every night and cry and go to sleep. What it says is the fundamental purpose of public policy is well-being. There's a very big difference between well-being and happiness, just like there is a big difference between pain and suffering. Well, happiness is immediate, just like pain could be immediate. Well-being is long-term, sustainable platform, just like suffering is long-term. So that's really the fundamental concept. The next thing we say, given that people care about all these things that we talked about before, and that these things are based on various types of capital, in other words, the ultimate sources of all these things we care about is human capital, which is our health and our education. It is our natural capital, it's climate, it's our biodiversity and so on. It's our social capital, the trust we have in each other, how we work together, our networks and so on, the communities, and of course economic capital is an engine. Those are the main ingredients, they are the sources of well-being. As people live the lives they want to live, what could public policy be looking out for in order to make sure that the opportunities are expanded? And those are the things that are around. So we want to make sure that the whole system, the communities, the country is resilient to all kinds of risks, that is big risks. That as we increasingly have a multicultural community, that we make sure that we live together in social cohesion, that everything we do is sustainable so that we are not destroying our resources at the expense of future generations. It's shared across society and across generations, and of course it generates more material well-being as well. In that context, poverty, which we define as exclusion, is critically an indicator that people do not have the capabilities and opportunities to live the kinds of lives they have reason to value. So it's in that very context that eradicating poverty is an absolute platform. And that's how poverty comes into the picture of national economic, social, and environmental policy. What this framework is saying to us is we must think of environment, social, and economic policy in a totally integrated way, otherwise it all collapses on you. Two examples: China has pressed on the accelerator on economic growth. Now they come to the OECD and say we are clearly doing something wrong, we've destroyed the environment. South Korea, having pressed on the accelerator on economic growth only, then comes to the OECD and says clearly we are doing something wrong, our people are miserable, unhappy, no work-life balance and all that. So this is not an argument against material well-being, it's simply saying how we generate that in a sustainable and equitable way is critical for overall public policy. So what this diagram basically shows, whatever we do needs to be based on our own history, culture, and values. You cannot cut and paste. You cannot say, cut a Finland solution on education, they are at the top of the world, and come and paste it here. You cannot take a German way of looking after their young people and their employment and paste it here. Everything we do has to be here, based in our history, culture, and values. The second thing you need to understand, if you want people to have the capabilities and opportunities, there is some absolute musts. Basic income, health, housing, education for all. That's critical. So what we're trying to do is to measure what real poverty in an exclusion sense is, and our statistics broadly show, and there's a huge variation across the country, that if you take the population at large and you look at real exclusion in the broader sense, 5 to 6, 7% of people are in poverty in that sense, and about 9 to 10% of children are. There's a lot of debate on whether that's increasing or not. That to me is a footnote. We have to deal with this right now. But the fundamental point then is our investment approach, as we call it. What should we be investing in order to start, and those are the capital stocks I showed you, human capital and so on. What should we be investing in? How to make sure that we actually progress this? So that's really the core of the investment approach. Conceptually, that's what it is. The way it is traveling, and we're nowhere there right now, is we know that the answers will be in the communities, not in Wellington. You need to create a machinery, which is starting to emerge anyway, to make sure that people are experimenting and trying things to deal with their own social problems in their own communities, creating a database where they can feed those solutions into an integrated system so that we can identify what works, and then emulating the UK and USA system where they have what works centers, which actually takes those ideas and says, let's run it through some trials and so on to make sure that they really work, and then implement them through contracting out for absolute social outcomes. An example of that is provided by a very small company called Pacifica Futures in Auckland, run by a lovely person called Debbie Sorensen. She has worked with her Pacifica community, identified 5 or 6 areas which the community deeply care about, and if they can affect those, that will change their lives. Found the institutions who can actually deliver those, so it's totally outcome-based, comes to the central government, says, give me the money, this is the outcome I want, this is how I will do it. If I don't deliver the outcome, not effort, I tried but the patient failed, I mean outcome, and then take out your money back. So that's really the direction of travel we are going towards, but it is nowhere there. One more. So by way of example, to tell you why it's not there, we have a lot of data now and a lot of analytical capability to be able to identify the children who are at risk of being in trouble, either health or in terms of going to jail in the future or something, we can identify. We say if a child has 4 or 5 of these symptoms, there is 80 to 90% likelihood that they will be in trouble. And even if you take a very narrow financial view that it will cost the taxpayer a lot of money, we know that we need to invest in these children and their families. The big challenge now is how to actually bring the public sector, which is a bunch of silos, to work together to deliver outcomes to their very children and families. And I believe that we need to turn this upside down and integrate those services in the regions, in the communities, with the center playing a supporting role rather than telling people how to live their lives. So that's where we are going. Thank you.